Okay, y'all, part 3 of going over American Indians in my set of encyclopedias from the 1890s. We are at 12. The Maya stock of Mexico and Central America, some languages of which had a kind of rude alphabetic writing. The Lenca and Isthmian groups are regarded as offshoots of this stock. 13. The Caribs and Orinoco Indians of many tribes. Here some would place the Chibchaws of Colombia, who anciently had a relatively high degree of civilization. 14. The Amazonian Indians, grouped in a great number of bands or tribes and having a very low intellectual position. Most of these tribes would appear to have few linguistic or other characters in common. Some regard them as chiefly offshoots of the 15 Tupi-Guarani race, which once covered a large part of Brazil and Paraguay. 16. The Botocudo race, once very powerful in Brazil, now greatly reduced. 17. The Quichu Aymara, I just butchered that, I know, group, to which belonged the old Peruvian civilization, the highest native development. 18. The Matobi of the Gran Chaco, with many subdivisions. 19. The Araucanian Patagonian stock, and 20. The Fuegians, comprising 6 or more degraded tribes, which some would assign to group 19, although the Araucanians are physically and morally one of the finest, as the Fuegians are amongst the lowest of savage races. Respecting the future of the American race, it is not easy to make a forecast. It is probably true that in North America, at least, the forcible expiration and deportation of tribes is a thing of the past. The ordinary operations of missionary work have not thus far, except in a few instances, borne the best fruit among the Indians. The best results have followed where industrial training has been joined to missionary instruction. Even the degrading Fuegians have begun to respond hopefully to this kind of training. The plan adopted years ago in the United States of paying annuities to the deported tribes no doubt took its rise in the desire to deal equitably with them, but the recent has been in many cases the swift pauperization and consequent moral degradation of the beneficiary tribes. In Canada, the case is different. The French character and methods of dealing always suited the ideas of the Aborigines. Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? And the two races amalgamated to a surprising extent under French rule. In later years, the French-speaking section of the Canadians seemed to have exercised a tacit protectorate over the Indians. At any rate, during the Indian disturbances of the Northwest in 1885, the French eminent was supposed to be largely in sympathy with the natives. The British and colonial authorities of Canada, however, from the very first have always endeavored to deal fairly and generously by the Indians, and have made the local French tradition fully their own. That's a fucking lie right there. Canada never had a real Indian war. Under the Hudson Bay's Company rule in Northwest, no Indian ever had cause to complain of injustice, and as consequence, the Indian committed few crimes. Bars and bolts were not needed on any doors. A distinguished English missionary of the Cowayton district has pronounced the natives there the most honest and excellent people in the world, except at those times when whiskey has been smuggled into their country. Now, wasn't it in Canada where they started finding all the residential schools where there was tons of babies buried from years prior? Now, I actually lost my Instagram for that a long time ago when that happened, when that was first coming out during lockdown. Sorry, I know this is like an offshoot. But I commented saying that anybody who's still alive that worked there, because there were still people, I said they all needed to be arrested because whether they did it or not, they all knew about it, and Instagram didn't like that and took my account. Go fucking figure. So I'm going to go out on a ledge here, and I'm going to say that the French probably had a hand in writing this, or at least it was European, because that's why they're trying to make themselves sound so good when we all know they are not at all. Okay, I digress. But it must be remembered that the Indian population of Canada was never nearly so dense as farther south, nor so hard pressed by the influx of white settlers as it has been in the United States from the first. Nothing but the absolute prohibition of immigration could have prevented Indian wars in the United States. The influx of settlers has been incessant, and as a consequence, the Indian wars of the country have been almost continuously waged until at last the large majority of the Aborigines of the country have been either extirpated or conquered and deported, while others have been pauperized and enfeebled by large subsidies. From the outset, many public men in the United States have interested themselves in the red man and his fortunes, but legislation has until of late been of little avail, and after all allowances, there is much to regret and to rouse the feeling of shame in the history of the relations of the white and red races in North America. The number of Indians and persons of partial Indian descent in North America is placed at 6 million, but this includes a very large number of Spanish-speaking half-breeds and mestizos of Mexico and the Isthmian republics. The Indians of Canada number about 100,000, and those of the United States, including Alaska, about 315,000. That's crazy. Even in 1890, that's crazy. I know that there was way more than that. There is reason to believe that the Indians of the United States are slowly increasing in numbers. If this is so, the increase must be due to the cessation of the intertribal conflict and the enforced adoption of regular habits of living in place of the rude nomadism of former tribes. You're right, Englishmen. We should be more polite like y'all, huh? Right? Because it's polite to come in and steal people's shit. Like, it's so fucking bass-ackwards. It's crazy how literally everything comes back to the exact same behavior of the blues. In the United States, non-tribal Indians are such as have received lands in severalty and voluntarily pay taxes. They are few in number. The civilized Indians of New Mexico and Arizona are by treaty United States citizens, but they have never desired or received the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. About 1/4 of the United States Indians live in the Indian Territory, and the rest mainly on local reservations. There is unquestionably of late a decided improvement going on among many of the Indian tribes. The South American Indians are estimated by some authorities to number not more than 1,700,000. A more reasonable estimate places the full-blooded Indians of South America at 3 million, and the mestizos, or people of half Indian blood, at half as many more. There is, however, very little real knowledge of the density of the Indian population of the forest regions, some of which are almost unknown to the whites. But as a rule, the population is very sparse. In Ecuador and Peru, many of the Indians are in a state of semi-slavery. See that too. In America, the only thing we're taught is that slaves were black people and slave owners were white people. And that's it, period. But it is so much bigger than that. Okay, y'all, I'm going to actually end it there because there's not a whole lot left, but it's a perfect time to go on. So come back for part 4.